If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Good morning, Brother Low. Welcome to Lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Visa Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined momentarily by one of our good friends, Rocco Miller, who does great work over at Bracketeer.org. We're going to be chatting with him about what we've all been seeing here in the offseason, some of these mid-major programs that have really done it right, because we're talking about all these major programs and the money that's being thrown out there, things like that. It becomes a little bit more difficult for these mid-majors to be able to find good talent, but teams in conferences like the American Conference, the Atlantic 10, that have really been able to do a good job here in the offseason. So we're going to highlight a lot of those, some of the teams that have things squared away, and how long it's going to take before we know what some of these rosters are going to be elsewhere as well, because there are a lot of teams with a lot of roster spots open. We're also going to talk about some of these guys that are, and I air quotes here, fishing for eligibility, and why you do have some of these guys that have played like 5 years of college basketball currently in the transfer portal. He actually has some good answers on that front. So we're going to be chatting here with Rocco Miller of Bracketeer.org here in a minute, and then in the final segment, going to give you guys a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Sunday. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunut_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And everything today is brought to you by EdgeBoost over at edgeboost.bet. They make sure that you're able to access your funds 24/7, 365 bettors that are looking to be able to get down their money. They're able to access their funds. They're able to every single day of the year, because unlike a lot of places, it's not running on credit or anything like that. It's an account that you're able to utilize at any time. You earn cashback rewards as you use EdgeBoost, and when you go to edgeboost.bet and type in the promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G, you're able to get a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. So they're doing great work, and so is Rocco Miller, who he's amazing over at Bracketeer.org. On top of that, he's been doing some great work with the Field of 68. He runs a major show every single year as well. He's a man that helps out with the scheduling for some of these teams as well, and he's over there at Bracketeer.org, but additionally on Twitter /X at Rocco Miller, his first and last name, the number 8 all together. And Rocco, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Great to be on with you, Greg. How have you been? What's been going on? It's almost May. Can you believe that?
It is almost May, and we're up to now 2,544 guys in the transfer portal. That time has come and passed to be able to enter in. But I mean, at this point, are there any rules with regards to transfer portal, and are there any rules in terms of eligibility? Because it feels like everyone is trying to test the waters with the NCAA, and I've been saying this on the podcast last few weeks, and I'll say it again. It feels like the NCAA and Cord are the equivalent of the Washington Generals in the way that they lose absolutely everything.
Very true. Yeah, I think that's the presumption. Now, there's a lot of cases, I think, that are still pending that will go on throughout the spring and summer that will go a long ways, and you know what's going to happen with different eligibility cases. That's one part of it. I think the key part of it that we're seeing right now that should be resolved within 2 weeks is the case that Judge Wilkins working on, which is the House settlement money, which is hugely impactful for how finances and money promised to players, et cetera, will be managed. You know, we just saw at the end of the week, the University of Kentucky has been the first school, to my knowledge, to go from a fully fledged public university athletic department funded that way for, you know, as long as it's been in existence. Obviously, a very old school, a blue blood team for basketball, but obviously a rich athletic department for all sports. And they've converted it to a limited liability company, Greg. It's got a tag considered, quote, private/public, which means they will be able to withhold information from the public, manage finances as a business versus a university. I think that will be the first flavor, maybe several flavors, or maybe that will be the primary flavor that power schools will operate under in order to pay players directly from the department and try to cut out a lot of the changing of accounts, maybe having to use accounts in the Caribbean to get money to players, and et cetera, trying to clean that process up. So we have a lot of this stuff happening simultaneously. Also simultaneously, as you mentioned, is the transfer portal technically closed at the, a week or two back. But I think, once you're in the portal, you don't have to commit. So there's still a lot of players, your Darian Williams, your RJ Luis, kind of at the top of that list. And then a lot of the guys who will enter the NBA draft and eventually come back to college and not stay in the draft that are just pending in the portal. So there's several teams like your Kansas, your Arizona. They probably look like portal losers to the public so far. It's really short-sighted because they're holding those spots for big-time players. You really got to wait until the dust is settled by early July for kind of all these reasons. And then the last piece, I think that what you're referencing, Greg, is so many of these players that are trying to go into the portal. They're not trying to. They are in the portal because you can be out of eligibility and still enter. So they're not doing anything against the rules. The big decision that needs to be clarified is, there are NIL agents out there and different law firms that are advising these players. And I give credit to like Ian Shefflin from Clemson, who in his own tweet said that he was advised due to all the pending NCAA cases to enter the portal on the very outside chance that I will be awarded with an additional year of eligibility. And that's exactly what's going on with like your Malik Thomases. There's a bunch of guys where you're just like, holy crap, we've watched this guy play a COVID year, 6 years at certain places. And so I think that's why you're seeing so much of it. All those guys are allowed to come back. That is a disaster for a lot of reasons, mainly because I've talked to several of the schools who kind of let those players, move on. They've had their senior day. They've graduated, et cetera. They're out of eligibility. That's been the discussion. They've already said their kumbayas and their goodbyes. And now all of a sudden they're going in the portal. Those schools that they left really didn't have a chance, in most cases, at least the ones I've talked to bring that player back because that was the expectation. And so if this player all of a sudden transfers to a rival in the same conference or to any other school, they really weren't afforded the ability to, prioritize them for a roster spot, which they probably would have done in most cases, especially, like a Malik Thomas here at San Francisco. I would hate to see that because I think that's going to create an unfair set of circumstances and chaos. Not that anything's really fair, but like that I think is a step too far just because everybody operated as the season was ending as if these players were out of eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely wild what we've seen here over the last few weeks. As joining me on the show, we do have Rocco Miller, who does great work over at bracketeer.org, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And when it comes to just what we're going to be seeing over the next few weeks, are there just some schools that are holding on to roster spots right now that they just don't know what they're going to get in the transfer portal, especially the mid-majors, because it does feel like a lot of these power conference teams are trying to get all their T's crossed, all their I's dotted, and I think that who this could benefit the most if some of these guys get an extra year of eligibility might be some of these mid-major teams that have had a little bit of a rough go of it in the transfer portal, and maybe, for lack of a better term, they just haven't been able to hook in as many of those big-time guys that came off the board early.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, I've talked to several that still have anywhere from 6 to 10 open scholarships. That's kind of crazy, which when I see people saying the portal is closed, it's not representative of reality. There's going to be a lot more musical chairs still to come. I feel like there's probably, and there always has been, about 4 different levels of college basketball. You've got the high majors, you've got mid-major plus, which is like your Mountain West, your WCC.
Atlantic 10.
There you go. Atlantic 10. We love the Atlantic 10. And American would all qualify. Some of the really good Valley programs also definitely qualify. And you've got your exceptions, like your nowadays it's the High Point, it's the McNeese for the last couple of years. Liberty certainly has resources. The Ivy League has really stepped up. So I would call that mid-major plus. Then everybody else is mid-major, and then we know who the low-major leagues are, whether it's the Patriot, the SWAC.
Sorry, SWAC.
Yeah, the MEAC. So we got 4 different levels we're playing with, right? So if you're a mid-major plus team, they're going to start eating the mid-majors and the low-majors. Then the mid-majors can go after low majors, JUCOs, Division II, Division III. There's players all over the place, but there's a clear mountaintop and then a pecking order. I talk to a ton of mid-major plus teams because that's really my sweet spot with helping with scheduling and creating meaningful games. just because the high majors do have so much power. I'd only get involved with a couple of their games in any given year, but at that mid-major plus level, I'm heavily involved doing a lot of the consulting for those programs. And so there's still a lot of dominoes to fall, much like the coaching carousel, Greg. So when the coaching carousel really starts spinning, it's because one school picks off another school's coach, then that opening happens, and it just keeps revolving the door until we end up with about 60 or 70 coaching changes. It's no different with rosters. A team might feel full right now. They could still lose a couple of guys and have to start over for those particular positions. Big picture wise, we still have a long way to go. And even at the very top, like I mentioned, Kansas and Arizona, I think, those are two that have left purposely a couple key roles. Arizona's got a 5-star kid that's going to go through the NBA draft process. He can either come back or, the word is if he stays in the draft, they'll have room and finances to go after Darian Williams to try to win the Big 12 with their other stars that they're bringing in. And those are just things you got to keep in mind because we're still not very close to the final picture of what these rosters will be in a lot of places.
Yep, I'm right there with you. If you're trying to make your way too early top 25 right here in late April, early May, it's going to be a defeatist effort, in my opinion. And here's my big question for you. When do you think that we're actually going to have a little bit more of an idea of these rosters? Because I felt like towards late May last season, we knew a lot of these guys. You had still a few guys like Arthur Kaluma, for example, on the board. But I felt like by late May, you were able to get a really good sense of these teams. You were able to start to project forward. And I just don't know if we're going to know what a lot of these teams are going to be looking like until the early summer months this year.
Yeah, it just depends. There are some that are pretty much set. I've been having great conversations with Illinois State, for example, who's bringing back perhaps their most exciting team in years with the return of Chase Walker and Johnny Kinzinger right there at the top, 2 all-league kind of players, and really got a great supporting cast around him with Landon Wolf, Landon Moore, Ty Pence, Jack Doherty, and Aiden Bozer and Cameron Barnes. And they sprinkle in a couple for Valley level, a couple impact freshmen potentially. So, you got a team like in Illinois State, they're already preparing to be, they're hoping to be that next Valley team that could be at large good. Bradley likes their team a lot. I know they've got a few more guys to go get, but they're mostly set. And you see Murray State, obviously everybody's brand new, but Ryan Miller has just been crushing the transfer portal. You would have to consider, at least on paper, with the additions of J.J. Traynor, Mason Miller, Javon Jackson, Lane Taylor, who was an amazing player before his injury at Central Arkansas as a freshman. Frederick King's been a backup center for Creighton for years, but I actually watched him when he had to start with Kalkbrenner hurt.
Should have gotten more minutes at Creighton.
Yeah. He'll be a beast in the Valley. You got KJ Tenner, Dylan Anderson's a 7-footer, been waiting to break out, got stuck on the bench at higher schools. And Ben Schultzberg, got paid pretty well to go to UC Santa Barbara. Now he's coming to Murray. He's got a ton of talent there. So we got a good idea, in some of these mid-major leagues, the Valley's a great example, who we really got to be paying attention to and pretty close to what they're going to look like or even having the full picture. So it's not a doomsday across the board. If you're tracking it as close as Greg and I are, you have to keep in mind, the full picture of the league is probably not going to be painted until another 45 to 60 days. But there are some teams you can really kind of feel good about.
Yep, and are those the teams that maybe you want to be looking at towards the beginning part of the season to be able to pick up those wins? Because I do think that being able to game chemistry right now, having a lot of guys coming back where you're able to get in some of these workouts while the, shall we say, spring semester is still going on for a lot of these schools, I think that that's absolutely massive. Whereas with a lot of these other teams that they're going to be adding guys in May, perhaps even into June and beyond, you're just not able to build that chemistry. You're not able to get in as many workouts and practices. And I think that that's a big deal for teams like you were referencing with Illinois State, those guys all coming back and having the familiarity with one another.
A very small example of that is, remember last year, Field of 68, we had a opening day at the Pentagon, and 2 of the matchups, one was St. Louis versus Santa Clara. Santa Clara brought back a good amount of guys. St. Louis had a little bit of chemistry. Obviously, Avila was dealing with his ankle issue at the start of the year. Pretty much everybody knew at St. Louis, whether it was a new staff and a lot of new pieces from a roster standpoint. So there you go, opening day, Santa Clara ends up winning that game, pretty significant advantage based on continuity alone, otherwise maybe equal talent. And then later that night, you saw McNeese, who had to really kind of reload, but obviously had a ton of talent. 1 or 2 guys back from that great year the year before, but did have to bring in a lot of new pieces, taking on a veteran South Dakota State team who did add Oscar Clough and lose Zeke Mayo, but South Dakota State ends up winning that game. So anyway, just two quick examples, but I always think general rule of thumb is you've got a pretty big advantage if you're a team returning a lot of your percentage of minutes. If that's anywhere from 70% or more, that's a significant number against a lot of the teams who are portal level, basically portal built, I should say. And they're coming in with 30% or less minutes continuity, or maybe even 0%, which we saw last year with like a USC who had 12 new players and countless other examples. So I think that helps you a ton in November. And especially if you're like in that mid-major plus range that I was talking about, that could be a huge difference in being able to build a resume and stay relevant in the at-large picture throughout the year or not. That's kind of where like Illinois State really wants to, hopefully I'm not sharing too much there, but they definitely are trying to schedule very aggressively because they know that.
Yeah, but I don't blame them there, because if you have that big of a leg up when it comes to beginning part of the season, when you've got that much chemistry coming back, I think that that's going to be a big deal, always has been, and I think that even more so now in this day and age. As joining me on the show, we do have Rocco Miller, does great work over at bracketeer.org, joining me on Coast to Coast Soups, and certainly I do think that these teams that they return a lot of guys, that's going to be the biggest, but I know you were mentioning it, you love these mid-majors, you love these mid-major plus teams, and even though they don't have the resources of the SEC, they don't have the resources of the Big Ten, what have you, there are still some teams that are doing it right. And I just want you to share with me a few teams that you've taken a look at what they've done this offseason, and you just feel like they're doing it right. Maybe they don't necessarily have $100 billion to spend, but they've been able to make the most out of their resources, and you feel like they put together a relatively good roster moving forward.
Yeah, well, I think one that's really standing out that really we haven't heard from in decades on a national stage is George Washington. They pick up some pretty good names overall from the portal, whether you look at Trey Dinkins, Trey Autry, Rafael Castro, Garrett Johnson, Gene Aranguren, Christian Jones. I mean, they've got a team right now. It's still early in the process. You have to take everything in a grain of salt, but they could be a top 50 team. I think that's where Bart Torvik has them, his 2026 projections. And anytime you look at his stuff during the offseason, there's a player or two typically missing. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt because it's not going to be spot on accurate, but it's really a fair way to just kind of gauge where teams are at. George Washington just behind VCU and St. Mary's as the third best in this whole range, even above teams like Memphis and San Francisco. And Memphis has had a shaky offseason, but they still have time to figure that out. I've been really impressed with San Francisco. They're right there next to St. Mary's, and George Washington's in that mix. So that really stands out. That's a team and a program. I don't think they've finished in the top 3 of the A10 since maybe Yinka Dare. That one pops for sure. And then UNLV is starting fresh with Josh Pastner. I think I mentioned them the last time I was on the show because Scott Garson is their associate head coach. He did a phenomenal job for years down here at Santa Clara, and they built a really good assistant coaching staff. And they're recruiting the heck out of the portal. Miles Che, lights out shooter from UC Irvine, just committed this past week. They picked up Rod Gibbs Lawhorn. I thought that was a big pickup. He got stuck a little bit at Illinois, but played quite a bit in the Big Ten. And now he's going to come to the Mountain West and probably be pretty confident going down a league. They pick up Al Green, who's also another great pickup. Have Emmanuel Steffen, Howie Fleming Jr., Nos Cunningham. So a lot of guys that I think can compete coming from both a higher level down to the Mountain West, if you will, and then guys, like Al Green coming up from La Tech. So I really like just the mix of athletes. They probably need to add another big unless they're going to hang their hat on one of their freshman signees, the German guy who's 6'11", Ferris. But Emmanuel Steffen at 6'11", should man down the middle. Bonner be at 6'9", and Tyron Jones at 6'8". So they've got some really highly touted freshmen to mix in with some proven vets. It's a good blend. I think UNLV could surprise some teams. It's an interesting year in the Mountain West, too, because, although San Diego State got the big time win with Gwath coming back, it just got revealed this last week, Greg, that he underwent knee surgery. So what does that mean? Is he even going to be himself next year? A lot of the early picks for San Diego State to win the league were based on a healthy Gwath. I'm not sure if we're getting that. So that's something to pay attention to. I know with Mason Falslev coming back to Utah State and several meetings with the Aggies already this spring, they feel very good about their chances once again. So they're going to be good. I don't think Colorado State will drop too far. Nevada's hungry to bounce back. Boise's got a lot of guys back. And I'm not overlooking New Mexico, even though they're going to all be new. We saw with Eric Olin at UC San Diego that regardless, even if he's a step behind in personnel, they run amazing offense. So I think New Mexico is going to do very well. So Mountain West, I know I kind of went on a tangent there, but the other team also just going down maybe over to the CAA, UNC Wilmington, very interesting haul going on because they're pretty much just plucking guys from their own league. You saw CJ Luster go over there, Madison Durs there, Noah Ross, Jonathan Lamothe, and Nolan Hodge. I think this Wilmington team, it's clear that they're spending more money than most of the league. I know Charleston has a nice budget too, but what Wilmington has done and what Towson's been able to bring back behind Tyler Tejada, I think we might have a really great battle between those three. I would go Wilmington or Towson for the CAA pick at this point. Pretty fascinating stuff going on out there. I also think Kennesaw is going to be even more improved. I know Woolley went to a high major, he went to Louisville, but there's some guys that were really good freshmen there last year that are going to take a jump as sophomores. The one that always stuck out to me after calling their games in Canada, Ron G. Gordon, just a beast in the middle. He's going to be even more physical. Hopefully I'm not hyping him too much. Hopefully it's too late for him to enter the portal because I want to see him play for the Owls next year. But I think Kennesaw State, Greg, early sleeper pick to maybe win Conference USA. You heard it here first.
I absolutely love it when we're able to get a sleeper pick in Miley Cyrus's favorite conference because it is a party in Conference USA. I absolutely love that. And to your point, the Mountain West doing a really good job of building themselves up, being out here in lovely Las Vegas. Been very impressed by what Josh Pastner has been able to do. And in my opinion, hopefully Memphis fans over the last few years have come to realize what they had in Josh Pastner in past years as well. So hopefully they appreciate that, and I'm sure that UNLV is going to be able to get up off the ground this season as we're always up and running when you're aboard, Rocco. You do such a great job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Love the good people at home. Know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you, especially this time of year. What's going on for me is I've been behind the scenes consulting several levels of programs across Division One. MTEs are pretty much the focus still. There's somewhere around 60 or so that are trying to put tournaments together. A lot of years we end up losing 5 or 10 just because they can't get the teams or things get combined. But it's an even bigger circus now because we've lost Myrtle Beach. We've lost the Diamond Head Classic. So really just, as soon as I have the final say, I'll probably be one of the first to put that information out there. You can follow me on Twitter at Rocco Miller 8. Always the first place to find me. Same handle on Blue Sky. Do some occasional stuff there. Bracketeer.org will have schedule pages coming out in May. We're almost to May. Can you believe it? Next week. So we'll start with the SEC, then go to the Big 10 and the Big 12. In scheduling, it always starts with the top. So the only logical way to roll out the conference pages is to do it by the top of the sport. We'll get those out first. I have another person helping out behind the scenes, so we're getting all those pages built as we speak. More information coming in every day. Constantly talking to programs, so anything I can share, I will on this program with you, Greg, and also on Twitter at Rocco Miller 8.
And Rocco just doing an absolutely superb job here in the offseason, getting us set for what is going to be a tremendous college basketball season. Though the games are not going on right now, the teams you're going to be seeing in March, the things that you're seeing that are going to be such a big impact when the season does get up and running. Those are all being built right now. The groundwork, it is being laid, and Rocco, he is at the forefront of covering it all. So big thanks to Rocco for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball on Sunday.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be able to get Rocco Miller aboard. He does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rocco for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. James Madison with a relatively solid ad. Paul Jones, who was over at Winthrop last season, he has decided that he's going to be going on over to James Madison. I really like what Preston Spradlin has been able to do throughout his coaching career. And for James Madison, was a little bit wobbly to begin the season last year, but you could tell that the team was finding its footing towards back half of the season last year. And I think that this is going to be a solid ad for them. Not a guy that's going to wow you. I don't think that he's going to be any sort of starter, but he does lend depth for a team that I know that they could certainly use it after what we saw a season ago. He was able to log for the team about 7.5 points, 3 rebounds per contest, a reasonable, not necessarily amazing, but reasonable three-point shooter as well. And for James Madison, we shall see what other moves that they are going to be making, because I know that this team was planning on being very active in the transfer portal this offseason, and I know that with Spradlin just trying to be able to, for lack of a better term, be able to get his system down in general, being able to find more of these glue guys that are going to be around for multiple years, that is going to be a big-time priority of his. And this is really the second transfer move that they made. They also are bringing in another Paul Lewis. He was playing over at UTSA, meet me for the Roadrunners last season. So these two guys should be able to do a rock solid job of be able to help out. And for Jones, by the way, he was actually a true freshman last season. So they have a lot of upside there. You had Demarion Yates, who last season was over at Memphis. He was a former NAIA/junior college standout over at Vincennes University. Just did not see the floor last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to Alabama State. Good gift for Alabama State, 6'5" guy that had a lot of fanfare coming out of the junior college level. Guy that was able to spend some time over at Memphis and Alabama State. They've done a nice job of being able to just transform this program a little bit more in general. I like the way that Tony Medlock has been able to operate things with a lot of positionless basketball. Yates at 6'5", he should be able to fit that bill. I do think that this is a good ad for them here in the interim. You've got Chadelier Newton. Hopefully I said that correctly. He was over at Grambling this last season. He was averaging about 7 points per contest as a freshman. He was shooting north of 45% from three-point range. He has decided that he is going to be joining Abilene Christian, and this is big for Abilene Christian because they just have really lacked three-point shooting over the last few seasons. With Abilene Christian last year, one of the most deplorable offenses at home that you're going to find in all of college basketball. Being able to be able to lift the top off of a defense, I think that that's very big for them. And I do think that he's going to be a really good system at as well, because for Abilene Christian, they're always based around being able to generate turnovers, being able to create a little bit of chaos. That Grambling defense, always one of the better ones out there in the SWAC, albeit they're not necessarily generating as many turnovers as Abilene Christian. There's no doubt about it. But I do think that he's going to be able to step in right away, be able to give this team some relatively solid minutes, be able to knock down those threes, and I think that that's really what this team is looking for. So a rock solid ad there. That's really their first of their moves here in the transfer portal. We shall see what else is going to be to come, but I do like that move over there as well. This is very interesting, as Caleb Lohner was actually drafted into the NFL draft after he spent a little bit of time playing for Baylor and Utah at the college level. So you do have to love to see that. We always like a little bit of good, clean family fun right there. So figured that I would give him a little bit of a shout out there, because the NFL draft that just came and went in our lives, and this is a interesting one, as you have Keyshawn Williams. He last season was over at Colorado State, was averaging about 5 points per contest. He was a guy that was able to really do a nice job when he was over at Northern Illinois a few seasons ago. He was a 15-point per game scorer. He has decided that he is going to be going to Iona. Now Iona is really starting to hit the ground running in terms of transfer portal. It took them a little bit of time to be able to get things going, because I do think that the firing of Tobin Anderson was very, very stunning. I'm going to call it what it is. But now for Iona, they're bringing in CJ Anthony, guy that didn't see a lot of minutes over at Cincinnati, but began his career at Cincinnati. Matt Reed is coming on over from Tulsa. Keyshawn Williams, I think, is a really nice upside guy that is able to handle the ball. He's capable of being a top flight scorer, as we saw in the MAC a few seasons ago. So I do like what they're starting to put together, and it's a very good ad for them. I think that this is a pretty solid ad as well. Jamari Tripp, he was over at Fordham this last season, averaged about 8 points, 4 boards, a little bit over a steal per contest. 6'6", do-it-all sort of player. He's going to be adding it over to a Rhode Island team that they just really lacked the, I guess you'd call it, interior with regards to their defense. Like, they did a really good job of being able to close out. Not a lot of teams to be able to pop it from three-point range, but inside they got absolutely destroyed. And for Tripp, he's a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. Last year did shoot about 34% from three-point range, so he's just solid enough 3-point shooter. At Fordham, he was pretty much a sixth man for the team as he only saw about 9 starts, but a guy that's able to pull in there a few rebounds, a guy that's able to play multiple positions. So I do think that versatility, good for a Rhode Island team that, let's call it what it is. It was a really good start for them last season, then they just went straight down the toilet bowl. They're looking to be able to avenge that, and for Rhode Island, this is very much a put up or shut up year for them because under Archie Miller, they just have not been able to really have that success within the conference. Again, last season outside the conference, it was going well for them, but I like what they've done here in the transfer portal, bringing in Jonah Hinton, a starter over at St. Bonaventure this past season. Miles Corey was rock solid over at South Alabama. You got RJ Johnson, who was a 15-plus point per game scorer over at Charleston Southern as well, so they've got a good blend, but they've had this a few times, and it hasn't necessarily been able to come to the forefront for them. We'll see if that changes this season. And for Missouri State, after last year, they did not hit the transfer portal whatsoever. They are now looking to be able to do so a little bit more. Amar Kuljajovic, who last season he was over at North Dakota, he was averaging about 10.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. He has decided that he is going to be joining Missouri State. Now for Missouri State, they were very close in a lot of their games last season. Like, I feel like they were better than the raw record would indicate. They were just a team that they were unable to pull out the late games. Part of that was the fact that the rebounding was a little bit hit or miss. Not going to lie to you, so they've been able to do a nice job of being able to address that. You've also got Antoine Burton, who's going to be coming on over from Grambling. He was a little bit of a do-it-all, 6'6" guy, and it does feel like there's going to be a lot of positionless basketball being played at Missouri State. I wouldn't be surprised if Kuljajovic, who had 6'8", is really that main big man, so we'll see how things are able to develop from here, but I do think that that's a solid add for them. Bryson Wilson, he last season was playing over at Buffalo. He was able to average about 7.5 points, just under 4 rebounds per game. He's going to be adding on over to Binghamton. I think that Binghamton is really getting it right here in the transfer portal. For Wilson, not a guy that was able to light you up from three-point or anything like that, but a guy that does a solid job of being able to get to the cup, and I do think that this is going to be a good add for a Binghamton team that the biggest thing for them is just taking care of the ball. Last season, they were absolutely terrible in terms of their ball security, and they did a good job on glass. They had some relatively good shooting, but the fact that they were unable to take care of the ball, that did cost them in a lot of different games. If they can just have Wilson, who is part of a Buffalo offense, and, well, they were sloppy with the ball, be able to just value it a little bit more in general, I think that there's going to be a lot of upside here. And for Binghamton, they brought in a few really nice transfers, as you've also got Demetrius Lilly, who was able to put on their 5+ rebounds, bring him over at LaSalle. You've got Jeremiah Quigley, who was a rock-solid scorer over at Iona a few seasons ago, coming in as well. So all in all, I take a look at this haul, and so far so good for them. This has been a relatively rock-solid offseason for Vanderbilt as well as the Commodores. They are landing Tyler Harris. For Harris, he last season was playing over at Washington, began his career over at Portland. He was averaging about 12 points per contest, shot north of 40% from three-point as a 6'8" combo player. Really do like this ad for Vanderbilt. I think that he fits this defensive scheme very well. His offense is certainly going to play, and for Vanderbilt, they've just added a little bit of everything. You bring in someone like a Mikey James, who was over at NC State. You bring in A.K. Okereke, who is very solid over at Cornell, a little bit of a do-it-all sort of guy. Jalen Washington is going to be able to help out on the glass, along with Mason Nicholson as well, and with this Vanderbilt team, it feels like they're trying to go with that Florida Noah's Ark approach. They've got two of everything now. Do they have the same level of talent that Florida did last year? No, we're going to call it what it is, but I do like the way that things are operating for them, and I do like the way that things are starting to develop on that front. By the way, getting back to James Madison, the fact that they are adding Paul Lewis, he was actually at Vanderbilt 2 seasons ago where he was averaging about 4.5 points per contest, so I did like that ad for them. Nevada's been very active in the transfer portal over the last 48 or so hours, and guys that were over at UTEP last season have been very active in terms of jumping ship. As for Nevada, they are going to be adding Corey Camper, who last season 10.5 points, 2 steals, 2 assists per contest, one of the better defensive players that you're going to find out there, and one of the best players in all of college basketball. In terms of being able to generate turnovers, Nevada did not do much of that this past season, and for Camper, he shot in the mid-30s from 3-point. Not going to be like some sort of prolific 3-point shooter, but he's a capable enough 3-point shooter for a Nevada team that it was all over the place for them last season, to say the least. They're bringing in Tayshaun Comer as a nice double-figure scorer over at Evansville last season. Elijah Price was rock solid down low over at Fresno State. Joel Armitrade, he committed to the program within the last 48 or so hours as well. So I really do like the way that things are starting to develop for them. I think that this is a pretty rock solid one as well. Nick Chumboyo, he was a very good junior college player 2 seasons ago. Last year over at Denver, 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, a low to mid-30s 3-point shooter. He's going to be adding on over to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. the Southland schools are really spending a lot in terms of their NIL collectives, what have you. It's been a little bit of a, shall we say, silent offseason for Corpus Christi. This has been their first ad, but this is a relatively solid one for a team that has been able to do a nice job of being able to generate turnovers, have really been able to do a good job in terms of their defensive scheme in general. So I do like what he brings to the table, and I do think that this one is going to be a good one for them. I think that this is also very rock solid as Binghamton, just with another ad as I am doing this podcast, as Dom Capriotti. He was over at Binghamton last season, so they're in the news because they actually lose this guy. But that's for Pacific. They're going to be picking up Dom Capriotti. He was over at Houston Christian 2 seasons ago. He was averaging 7.5 points, shot 38.5% from 3-point range. A pretty rock solid ad for Pacific, a Pacific team that under Dave Smart last season, it was a little bit slow going for them, but you can tell that there's the, shall we say, semblance of a relatively solid team that should be able to rise up this upcoming season. They've also got Isaac Jack, who's coming over from Dayton at 6'11" to help things out. Jaden Clayton, who is a rock solid guard over at Maine, he's in the fold, and Alexis Marmayole is a double-figure scorer from Lamar. He's coming in as well. I really like the way that Pacific is starting to operate things. For Pacific, I don't think that they're going to be winning the WCC anytime soon, but you know what? They're looking much more respectable right now, and this is a little bit more of, I should say, a depth ad, as you've got Jordan Key. He last season was over at Georgia. He's decided that he is going to be going to Miami. Now for Miami, I do have to wonder how many roster spots they're going to have left moving forward, because it feels like they have filled darn near every single one of them. So credit where it is due to this new coaching staff and making sure that they are getting dudes that are going to be able to give this team some production. But that said, this was a formerly pretty highly touted guy. I don't know if he's going to be seeing a ton of minutes, especially when you're bringing in the likes of a True Washington from New Mexico as a rock-solid scorer, Trey Donaldson. He was a starting guard over at Michigan, and he had some great moments last season as well. Malik Renew, Ernest Uday, they're going to be very much manning things down low. So the amount of minutes that you're going to be seeing out of Key, I think, is a little bit TBD. But that said, this is someone that stands right around about 6'3", 6'4". In terms of his recruitment, he was a little bit more of a 3-star guy. Wasn't necessarily able to crack into the top 150 or anything like that. But you know what? You've got a guy that was able to spend some time last season at the college level rather than bringing in a true freshman and a guy that was pretty highly touted. So do think that there's a little bit of upside there. There certainly is going to be some upside in terms of this one as well, as you've got Chris Hodge heading on over to Montana State. He last season was over at Wisconsin. Just really didn't see a lot of playing time in general. He was glued to the bench because when you're behind the likes of a Tyler Wall 2 seasons ago last year, obviously it was guys like Stephen Kroll and company, you're just not going to see a lot of minutes in general. But that said, when this guy was coming out of high school, Mr. Hodge, he was a top 200 recruit. He was one of the most highly touted guys out there in the state of Illinois. I believe that he was class of 2021, and 247 Sports rated him within the top 250. So guy with a little bit of upside. Montana State has had quite a bit of success going this route, looking at some of these guys that were maybe at a power conference level, but they were just unable to see a lot of minutes in general. And for Montana State, this is really the first splash ad I would say that they have. They also are bringing in Christian King, who he was very similar over at Washington, spent a little bit of time there, but just couldn't really get out there on the floor. So a little bit TBD as to what we're going to be getting out of them, but I do like this ad for them, and then I do like this ad as well. Bay Fall, he was over at Kansas State this last season. He was a former very highly touted guy, but just could not get out there on the floor in general the last few seasons. He has decided that he is going to be going to Rutgers. For Rutgers, they're getting back to their roots. They're looking to be able to bring in some more of these big men after last season. They brought in the two most likely lottery picks, and it didn't necessarily go well for them. But I mean, this is a guy in Fall who I remember when he was coming out of high school, he was a top 35 recruit in that class of 2023. Just has not been able to find his footing in general. Should be able to do a rock solid job on the defensive side of things. Should be able to do a nice job down low as well. So I do like this pickup for them, and I always love being able to chat with you guys on this podcast. Coast to Coast Soup says the teams that are building themselves up for the runs in March, the teams that are going to be able to make you money during the college basketball season, they are being formed right now, and I am letting you guys know all these moves every single day on this podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Soups, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And a big thanks once again to our good friend Rocco Miller over at Bracketeer.org for joining me in live segment. And I'm coming at you guys every single day on this podcast, which means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.